Have you ever been blamed for seeing too much? Well, in dysfunctional systems, the scapegoat isn't the problem. It's the person who refuses to stay blind. Here's a twist. Your role as scapegoat concealed a secret strength. You were always the one who saw clearly. I didn't understand this until I realized my gift was the very thing my family feared. When I started waking up to the dysfunction around me, I felt like I was going crazy. I couldn't understand why no one else noticed the gaslighting, why no one wanted to talk about the manipulation, why I felt like the villain for simply naming the pattern. And when I spoke up, I was met with silence, projection, defensiveness, disgust. At first, I thought maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was broken. But the more I healed, the clearer it became that I wasn't losing my mind. I was seeing clearly in a system designed to keep truth blurry. This is the turning point, where the scapegoat finally sees their role not as exile, but as evidence of inner clarity. Let's talk about the trauma of being misunderstood. When you're scapegoated long enough, your perception becomes your enemy. You start to second guess yourself. You start to shrink your instincts. You explain, defend, or adjust, trying to prove you're not the villain they made you out to be. You internalize the narrative. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I am making a big deal out of nothing. Maybe I am the unstable one. But here's what's really happening. You were holding a frequency that threatened the illusion. You saw the fragmentation everyone else was pretending not to feel. You named what they buried. You felt what they suppressed. And for that, you became the target. Not because you were wrong, but because you were uncontainable. In a relational system built on unspoken contracts, the one who breaks silence is always labeled the threat. You were never too much. You were simply unwilling to abandon your knowing. And that refusal is sacred. Let's reframe this completely. Scapegoating is not a reflection of your dysfunction. It's a reflection of your discernment. In spiritually or emotionally dysfunctional relational systems, truth-telling gets pathologized. Honesty gets punished. Sensitivity gets reframed as instability. Why? Because clarity interrupts control. Because empathy destabilizes hierarchy. Because authenticity requires others to confront themselves. And if they're not ready to do that, they will push you out fast. This is why so many scapegoats become seekers or light workers. You leave the system and begin asking bigger questions. Who am I without their projections? What if I was never broken, just awake? What if my sensitivity wasn't a flaw, but a compass? The long-term cost of being scapegoated is deep self-doubt. But the long-term gift is vision. Because once you reclaim your clarity, without needing others to validate it, you stop being the exile. You become the sovereign. So how do you rebuild trust in your own clarity after years of being scapegoated? First, name the role. Say it directly. I was cast as the scapegoat, but that's not who I am. You can't alchemize what you're still denying. Second, try to track the habit of over-explaining. Notice when you start arguing your perspective just to be seen. And pause and breathe through that. Let them misunderstand you if they must. Third, Start validating your perception in private. Keep a record. Moments when your intuition was right. Moments you saw what others couldn't. These patterns become your receipts. They help you rebuild inner credibility. Fourth, stop negotiating with distortion. Some people are not confused. They're committed to misunderstanding you. Withdraw your energy from the performance. Fifth, build your relationship with the inner witness. Meditation, journaling, voice notes, prayer, stillness. Let your clarity be mirrored back to you by something higher than approval. Transmute the pain of being scapegoated into the deep, unshakable clarity of self-sourced sight. Spiritually, the scapegoat is not a mistake. The exile was initiation. You were never meant to belong to the lie. You were never meant to normalize what was misaligned. You were never meant to dim your clarity so others could stay comfortable. Your exile created space. Space to see, space to remember, space to heal, and now space to lead. You don't need to reclaim a place in the system you outgrew. You're not here to fit back in. You're here to walk in the clarity that got you cast out in the first place. Because that same sight, the one that made you dangerous, is now what makes you magnetic. If you're walking through this phase right now, finally seeing that the pain of exile was also protection, I want you to know you're not alone and you're not crazy. Inside the sovereignty sequence, we reframe the scapegoat identity as a stage of spiritual awakening, not a label to escape, but a wound to integrate. You don't need to prove your truth. You just need to stop giving it away. If you want a starting point, just comment, give me the guide, and I will send you my free download, 7 energetic boundaries for awakening empaths. Tools to help you protect your sight while you learn to trust it again. You weren't cast out because you were wrong. You were cast out because you saw clearly. You weren't too much. You were too honest. You weren't unstable. You were awake in a system built on sleep. Now it's your turn to live in that truth. Not by proving it, not by arguing for it, but by becoming the space where truth no longer needs defense. Let them misunderstand you. Let your clarity stand on its own. You don't owe them confusion. You owe yourself peace. And as always, may the shadow wane and the stardust remain.